My journey to becoming a night shift receptionist at a small hotel in Norway wasn't exactly planned. After graduating with a degree in hospitality management, I had dreams of working at luxurious resorts, but the job market had other ideas, and I found myself struggling to find work in my field. When an opportunity came up for a night receptionist position at a quaint hotel in Norway, I jumped at the chance. It was a foot in the door, and I figured I could work my way up. Plus, the idea of living in a new country was exciting. At first, the job was everything I expected: quiet nights, minimal guest interaction, and plenty of time to catch up on my favorite shows and games. But as the months wore on, the monotony started to get to me. I found myself craving some excitement, anything to break up the tedium of my shifts. That's when I received an email from someone calling themselves Scooter. It was a typical scam attempt. He wanted to book a room for an extended stay and asked for pricing information so he could send his credit card details. Normally, I delete these without a second thought, but that night, boredom got the better of me. I decided to play along and see where it would lead. I sent Scooter a quote for a 20-day stay, making sure to mention our free cancellation policy. To my surprise, he responded quickly with a credit card number. When I ran it through our system, it didn't match Scooter's name. Intrigued, I told him the card was declined and asked for another. He promptly sent a different card. Again, not in his name. At this point, I knew I was dealing with a scammer, but instead of shutting it down, I decided to turn the tables. I told Scooter the second card had gone through and gave him a fake booking reference. A few hours later, right on cue, Scooter emailed to cancel the booking and requested a refund to a different card. He claimed he'd lost his wallet and deactivated the original card. I played along, telling him it wouldn't be a problem to transfer the refund to the new card. Scooter eagerly provided the new card number and asked if I could process the refund right away. I replied that I'd be happy to help, but explained that our email server was scheduled for maintenance in a few minutes. I told him my boss would handle the transfer on Monday, but if he needed the money sooner, he could call the hotel before my shift ended at 7 a.m. As expected, Scooter called almost immediately. I took down his new card details and phone number, assuring him the money would be in his account by noon. After my shift, curiosity got the better of me. Using the phone number Scooter provided, I managed to find his Facebook profile. To my amazement, he had an open profile that listed his address and employer. Even more shocking, he worked at another hotel. Realizing the implications, I decided to take action. I called Scooter's hotel and spoke with the manager. I explained that I had reason to believe one of their employees was involved in credit card fraud, and that the compromised cards belonged to some of their recent guests. The manager sounded confused and asked who I was talking about. I gave him Scooter's name and the names on the credit cards he'd tried to use. The manager's reaction was explosive. He mentioned that Scooter was there on a government work program. He assured me he would deal with the situation immediately. Feeling like I needed to do more, I contacted Visa and MasterCard to report the attempted fraud. They were very interested in the information I provided, especially the connection to Scooter's workplace. A few days later, I received a call from the police asking for a statement. I told them everything I knew, hoping it would be enough to stop Scooter's scamming activities for good. I never heard directly what happened to Scooter, but I couldn't resist checking his Facebook profile a few weeks later. His employment status had changed. He no longer worked at the hotel. Looking back, I realized my boredom could have led me down a dangerous path. Playing along with a scammer isn't something I'd recommend, but in this case, it led to exposing a criminal and potentially protecting future victims. It certainly made for an unforgettable night shift, and a story I'll be telling for years to come. When I was in high school, my family moved to a small property on the outskirts of town in the Texas Panhandle. It wasn't much, but it had a nice little garden, a barn that doubled as a junk shed, and a small pond. We were excited about our new home, especially the pond. We decided to stock it with fish and make it our own little oasis. Little did we know, our new neighbors had other plans. The day we moved in, a couple from next door came over. They didn't introduce themselves or welcome us to the neighborhood. Instead, they launched into a speech about how the previous owners had let their kids run wild on our property. The entitled neighbors informed us that their children had always played in the barn and swam in the pond, and they expected that to continue. My dad tried to explain politely that this was now private property, and we couldn't have unsupervised children running around due to safety concerns. The neighbors insisted that the previous owners never had a problem with it and accused us of being unreasonable. My dad pointed out that we weren't the previous owners and mentioned that there weren't any fish in the pond before we stocked it, questioning what their kids had been fishing for. They left in a huff. The next morning, I woke up early to head to school. As I walked out the front door, I saw a young boy standing on our dock, peeing into the pond. I was so shocked I couldn't even speak. He saw me, grinned, and ran off. Things only got worse from there. We started finding dead rabbits in our driveway. At first, we thought it might be coyotes or other predators, but after a few days, I decided to take a closer look. The wounds weren't from animal bites, they were from BBs. My dad set up a stakeout, and sure enough, we caught the neighbor kids shooting rabbits on our property with BB guns. When my dad tried to confront them, they ran home. He went to their house to talk to their parents, but no one would answer the door. A few days later, we caught one of the kids peeing on our lettuce in the garden. We chased them out multiple times, cleaned up the trash they threw in the pond, and even had to put out fires they started. We put up no trespassing signs and called the police, but it didn't seem to make a difference. The kids even broke into our barn and stole some things. The final straw came on a warm summer day. My dad and sister decided to take a dip in the pond. Within half an hour, they came out screaming, covered in a red swollen rash. We rushed them to the ER, where they were diagnosed with a severe parasitic skin infection. The doctor said it could potentially spread to other tissues and even affect the brain if left untreated. As we were leaving the hospital, we saw the entitled neighbors piling into their car. My mom, trying to be a good neighbor despite everything, called out to warn them. She urged them to stay out of the pond, explaining that it wasn't safe. They ignored us completely, got in their car, and drove off. The very next day, we heard screams coming from the direction of the pond. After everything that had happened, after we'd explicitly warned them, they'd gone swimming anyway. My dad called their parents to let them know what had happened and to suggest they take the kids to the hospital. To our surprise, instead of being grateful for the information, they threatened to sue us for having a dangerous attraction on our property. My dad reminded them that we had put up no trespassing signs, told them multiple times to keep their kids off our property, and even warned them specifically about the pond the day before. He asked how this could possibly be our fault. The entitled parents argued that we should have fenced off the pond and claimed their poor babies were suffering because of our negligence. My dad retorted that their poor babies had been trespassing, vandalizing our property, killing animals, and ignoring every warning we'd given. He suggested that if they had been paying attention to what their kids were doing, none of this would have happened. They hung up on us, but we didn't hear anything more about a lawsuit. I guess they realized they didn't have a leg to stand on. After that incident, the entitled neighbors seemed to finally get the message. We didn't see the kids on our property anymore, and the rabbit killing stopped. It was a relief to finally have some peace and quiet. My life was pretty normal before all this happened. I had a decent job as an accountant, a loving wife, and we were even thinking about starting a family. We'd been married for 5 years and things were going well. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but we were happy. Everything changed when my wife started hanging out with a new group of friends. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd always been social, and I was glad she was making new connections. But then I noticed she was staying out later and later, coming home with bloodshot eyes and a jittery energy I'd never seen before. I confronted her about it, and after some pushing, she finally admitted she'd been using meth. I was shocked and heartbroken. I knew we had to get her help, but she refused, saying she had it under control. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I did some digging and found out who her dealer was. He worked at a local store, but everyone knew that wasn't his main source of income. I went to confront him one day after work. I approached the dealer and asked if I could talk to him for a second. He responded gruffly, asking what I wanted. I told him I knew about his side job and what he'd been doing with my wife. I asked him nicely to stop contacting her and selling her drugs. The dealer tried to play dumb, saying he didn't know what I was talking about. I then proposed a deal. If he agreed to never contact her or answer if she called, I'd walk away right then with no police involvement or trouble. After a moment, the dealer agreed, saying he'd leave her alone. We shook hands. 2 months later, I lost my job because I was spending so much time trying to help my wife. She finally agreed to go to rehab, but our savings were drained. Meanwhile, this guy was still out there partying and ruining lives. I couldn't let it go. I started following him, taking notes on his routine. I learned when and where he picked up his drugs, the routes he took, everything. Then I made a call to his workplace's corporate office. I spoke to someone at the corporate office, telling them I needed to report something about one of their employees. I informed them that he had been selling drugs out of their store. 2 days later, he was fired. But that wasn't enough for me. I called a friend who works for the state police. I told my friend that I'd been tracking this drug dealer. I admitted I knew it wasn't exactly legal, but expressed my desire to help take him down. My friend advised against it, but said I wasn't breaking any laws. So I gave him all the information I had, including the fact that this guy regularly drove past an elementary school with drugs in his car. Oh, and his tags were expired. A few days later, he was pulled over in a school zone and arrested. He got sentenced to 12 years in prison. I wrote him a letter explaining everything I'd done. I wanted him to know why he lost his job, why he was arrested, and why he'd be spending over a decade behind bars. My wife eventually got clean and I tried to forgive her. I really did. But after 3 years of trying, I couldn't do it anymore. The trust was gone. We got divorced. It wasn't easy, and it didn't feel great right away. But now looking back, I don't regret what I did. That guy was a predator, targeting vulnerable women and even teenagers. He thought he could get away with it because he always had before. When he got out of prison 4 years ago, I saw him around town a few times. I tried to talk to him, but he always ran away. Eventually, he moved to a different city and got married to an older woman. I don't hold a grudge against him anymore. I feel like he got what he deserved. If he ever decides to come after me for revenge, I'm not too worried. I've moved on with my life, but I'll never forget what happened. Some people might say I went too far, that I should have let the police handle it from the start. But when you see someone you love being destroyed by drugs, when you see a dealer preying on people without any remorse, sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands. I'm not a hero, and I don't pretend to be. I did what I thought was right, and I'd do it again if I had to. On the very first day of high school, I met him. The guy who would make the next 4 years of my life a living nightmare. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, good-looking, and oozing confidence. From day one, he decided I was going to be his personal punching bag. As I walked into class, he sneered at me, mocking my backpack and suggesting my mother had picked it out for me. I tried to ignore him, but he wasn't having it. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path. He taunted me, asking if the cat had got my tongue. I quietly asked him to leave me alone, explaining that I just wanted to get to my seat. He responded by mocking me further, asking if I was going to cry like a baby. That was just the beginning. Every day brought new torments. He'd call me names, shove me in the hallways, and spread nasty rumors about me. Once, he even stole my lunch and dumped it in the trash right in front of me. He gloated about it, telling me I'd be going hungry that day and calling me a loser. I tried telling the teachers, but he was smart. He always made sure there were no witnesses, and his charm meant that most of the staff adored him. I was just a weird, quiet kid who was probably making it all up for attention. The worst was how he turned the whole class against me. By the end of the first month, I had no friends. Everyone was either too scared of him or thought it was funny to watch me squirm. One day, I finally worked up the courage to confront him. I asked him why he was doing this to me and what I had ever done to him. He just laughed. He told me he did it because it was fun and that I was an easy target. He suggested that if I wasn't such a pathetic loser, he might leave me alone. Those 4 years felt like 1,000 years. But finally, mercifully, high school ended. I moved to a different city for college, determined to reinvent myself. And you know what? It worked. I came out of my shell, made friends, and discovered a passion for dental medicine. By the time I graduated in 2016, I was a completely different person. I threw myself into my career, doing community outreach and building a network of colleagues I respected. Life was good, and I rarely thought about those painful high school days. Then came the Facebook invite to my high school's 50th anniversary reunion. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. As I scrolled through the group, I saw his profile. My old tormentor hadn't fared so well in life, jumping from job to job, often unemployed and now involved in something illegal. He and his wife were performing dental work without a license, charging desperate people a fraction of the normal cost for things like braces. As a licensed dentist, I knew how dangerous this could be. Improper dental work can cause serious, lasting damage. For a moment, I felt a surge of vindictive glee. Here was my chance to get back at him for all those years of torment. But then I remembered my oath as a dentist, to do no harm and to protect public health. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about stopping someone dangerous before they hurt more people. I reached out to some colleagues in the local dental association, explaining the situation. They put me in touch with law enforcement, and together we planned an undercover operation. A few weeks later, I got the call. They'd caught him red-handed, installing braces on an undercover officer. Both he and his wife were arrested on the spot. I never told him I was involved in his arrest. As far as he knows, it was just bad luck. Last I heard, they're both still in jail awaiting trial. The legal system here moves slowly, so it could be a while before they face a judge. I've moved on with my life now. I have a successful practice, good friends, and a community I care about. Those high school days are just a distant memory. But sometimes when I'm treating a nervous young patient, I remember that scared kid I used to be. And I do everything I can to make sure they feel safe, respected, and cared for. Because in the end, that's what really matters.